And so the lesson there was, I guess, sort of trust people and assume good intentions.
Yeah.
Obviously, don't be naive, but
Yeah.
assume good intentions, and then you tend to go into those interactions a lot more openly. They'll listen to you, you listen to them, and it's a lot less confrontational. And similarly, obviously, recognize that everyone's got strengths and sort of skills that they can bring to the table, and so that in a small team that works well.
Reflecting back on your career as well, if you've got any, but what would be a big, well, or one mistake that ended up being kind of a major learning experience for you?
Okay, yeah. So I thought about this one, and one came to mind really quickly. So back that first company that I was mentioning to people, sort of help me find. So that was TraceSmart. It was a relatively small company in Cardiff, and then we went through that journey of being bought by LexisNexis, and that was their way of sort of getting into the UK market, going more global. And when that happened, you go from being this small company where everyone's kind of doing a bit of everything, you've got a reasonable amount of control, to suddenly being part of this this massive machine.
Yeah.
We went through 3 years of kind of integrating into the company and sort of getting kind of a little bit more closely aligned to what they were doing. But the big mistake I made there was that was also when I was sort of stepping into leadership and kind of and sort of learning. But we were, and I particularly was, very defensive around our team and trying to maintain our culture and sort of trying to kind of keep everyone else at arm's length. And maybe the big part there is maybe assuming that either they didn't know best, or that their intentions were not all genuine and true and sort of for the best of us in the company. Now, what that meant was, for those 3 years, we made progress, but we were a bit of an island. We didn't get the benefit of these other great teams that were all over the world as well. We didn't learn quite so much, and we rebuilt sort of patterns. We had to kind of work out and build things using patterns that we didn't know, but these other teams could have easily shared with us if we just listened a little bit more. And so the lesson there was, I guess, sort of trust people and assume good intentions.
Yeah.
Obviously, don't be naive, but
Yeah.
assume good intentions, and then you tend to go into those interactions a lot more openly. They'll listen to you, you listen to them, and it's a lot less confrontational. And similarly, obviously, recognize that everyone's got strengths and sort of skills that they can bring to the table. And so that in a small team that works well, because individuals tend to interact better, but in the larger teams and companies, that's really important, because there's always going to be a team that you're maybe doesn't quite align to the way you think someone should do something, but that's fine as long as they're able to help you and you're able to help them.
Yeah.
Build trust and relationships. Don't try and be an island.
Yeah. No, I like that word, relationships, because you can almost ring fence yourself.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, you're on your own island, you're hidden away, and you're not exposing yourself and your team to other areas of the business then as well for, progression, growth, self-development. And I guess I often see when companies, you mentioned, obviously the company come in and acquired them, we do see hostile takeovers, and they always seem and looked at in that way. Whereas I think predominantly, there's other routes, and you can get lots of positive experiences out of.
And the way that went for us was really positive in the end. 3 years of really hard graft and sort of finding your feet, as well as them finding their feet with actually kind of buying the company. But after that, if I look back, once we stopped being quite such an island, we still had a nice position where we were in Cardiff, kind of doing our own thing, having a bit more control, but then similarly supported by this great network of people all over the world. And if I look back at sort of colleagues and peers and everyone, I had lots of growth there. I was really lucky.
Yeah.
But then so did lots of the different team members, sort of leaders. People have grown into leadership positions. People have grown into various different individual contributor positions in development, project management, data science, all sorts of roles. So it was a really good journey once we opened up a little bit and all started to trust each other.
Yeah. Looking back as a young, well, not necessarily young, but a junior developer, because we're seeing lots of people having career changes now more than ever, not being that confident to maybe make the jump halfway through their career into a technical role or going back to university. But I guess what do you think junior developers should focus on now, if you've learned anything from over your career, if you can think back 15 plus years ago, what would be important now? Would you look over kind of technical skills, soft skills?
Yeah, and I think this one's an interesting one. I think you need to consider both, but you
Okay.
don't need to be an expert in both. So, if I look back at myself as an example, so I did do a software engineering degree. So I worked on technical skills and that side of it. But within the degree, I didn't build up those kind of interpersonal skills and that side. And
Yeah.
um, but what I did do was I was just working in I was working in retail, your standard part-time job while you're in studies. So a few hours a week, that sort of thing. But I started looking for part-time jobs that were kind of doing something with computers. I didn't mind what it was, but something
Yeah.
with computers just to kind of get some experience. And I ended up finding a job with L'Oreal where they were looking for someone for 16 hours a week. It was kind of up the upper end of what I could do, but it was perfect
Yeah.
because that got me into an office, into an environment where I could kind of get a feel for how businesses operated, how financial sorts of systems worked.
Yeah.
Um, and that led to an industrial placement, doing a year in London with L'Oreal in their head office. But um, in that regard, that wasn't where I wanted to go in the long run. I didn't want to become, say, an IT support specialist. But it did get me into that environment where I could kind of build my confidence. I could get used to working with people at all different levels, engage in projects and those sorts of things, as well as then sort of getting little opportunities and building up that network. While I was also working on technical skills, I think if I was guiding someone now, I feel like there's a lot more route into um, technology roles now, maybe than there were then. So you can go the traditional route, like I did effectively. So doing a degree in whichever the skills, and then trying to find, say, a grad scheme or find that first role. But you also have then like the boot camps and those sort of intensive courses that help you upskill and transition over. Um, or you can sometimes navigate that within a company that you already work in, and that's also quite an interesting route. So
Yeah.
um, that would be something like it's happened in LexisNexis and it's happened in our team in Mintel,
Yeah.
where you have someone who is they're working in maybe like an operations team. They're doing one role, but then they're gradually they do a course or whether it's a boot camp, could be a part-time degree, could be just training and sort of personal development. But they start to get those skills where they could
Yeah.
step over into QA, into development, into systems engineering, whatever. Um, and then it's really about them trying to kind of make sure people know where their interests are, what they're trying to do, building their relationship, getting to know someone in, let's say, my team or equivalent, and for the leaders to be open to that as well. Because for the example in LexisNexis and the example here, someone came and just tapped me on the shoulder and said, "This person's doing this. Do you think there's a chance we could sort of somehow get them some experience in your team?" And it maybe couldn't happen immediately, but it meant over the next few months I could line something up
Yeah.
or look for those opportunities. And we've ended up with really really capable developers, really good developers stepping in with a completely different background
Mm.
um, than a lot of the people we already had in the team. So I would say try and find those opportunities to build the softer skills.
Yeah.
Sports teams, things like that, sometimes are an
Yeah.
interesting one because they
Yeah.
really help people come out of their shells. It did with me as
Definitely.
well, where you kind of just it helps you be a little bit bolder than you would be otherwise. Or if you get the chance to work in different places or whatever, just trying to meet people who are not just the people you're working with day to day is massive. But then also build up the skills focused into the domain that you want to go. One of the pitfalls I see sometimes is I'll see people saying, like the LinkedIn looking for work, no problem with that, but people will list the roles they want and they'll basically list everything.
Yeah.
There'll be want to be a project manager, a developer, a QA, security specialist. It's like whatever gets me in. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it's good to be sensibly open-minded on the path that you find in. but you need to show some focus into what interests you and where you want to go. So if you want to be a quality engineer or you want to be a software engineer, focus on that and be clear that that's like, that's the path you want to take, but then be maybe open-minded on the skills you use to get into it. So maybe learn a couple of development languages, one main one and something that's sort of you know but not as well, so that you can find a job that's either using Python or is using PHP or whatever, rather than kind of going, right, it has to be this and restricting yourself. But yeah, so balance these skills, be sensibly open-minded. There we go.
I'd like to ask, and one that I'm going to be asking often because it's quite, I guess, a hot topic. Hopefully everyone doesn't answer the same, but what technologies do you think are going to have the biggest impact in the next couple of years and why?
So I'm going to say the one that you don't want anyone to say because everyone's going to say it. But I'll explain myself. So obviously AI, as in machine learning, artificial intelligence, everything around that is obviously the hot topic at the moment. But really for me, it's not the thing that's going to solve everyone's problems. But we're obviously in that sort of period of learning how to use it well and to introduce it sensibly where it makes sense, where it makes sense. And in that regard, companies do need to keep on top of that. So like in our case, we need to be thinking how we can use those capabilities to help answer problems that have been hard to answer in the past, or to do things like automate those simple tasks so that we can focus our teams and ourselves towards the harder stuff, or the sort of more things that are challenging to automate. And so companies need to keep on top of thinking kind of about the impact and not falling behind because operationally they're less effective, those sorts of things. But similarly then for technical people, they need to be sort of developing that extra skill in their arsenal around how to use it as a tool alongside maybe like their development or their testing, how those technologies kind of come together so that they can use them while they're actually creating solutions. So that's one. I don't think it's like the tool that solves everything, but we do need to keep on top of it in the same way that go back quite a few years now, everyone needed to develop understanding of cloud, even if they didn't work in it day to day. The other part for me is there's lots and lots of data being generated all the time. And so working with data well and actually using it to answer questions or to create insight is really hard. And generally people aren't that good at it, of maybe like visualizing what it means, those sorts of things. And so perhaps it's not a technology, but it is a skill that, like when we're looking at who we bring into the team or how we evolve what we do, we need people who can think creatively around, like, how can I use this data to answer the question I'm trying to answer, and then visualize it in a way that's going to make sense to people. And there's a few skills in there, like understanding, the emerging and the current data technologies. It's not all the MySQL database anymore. You've got all your different data capabilities, but you'll tend to need to be able to use a database, but also then to be able to use those distributed systems and those other tools, as well as then understanding a little bit about how to visualize it using using your BI tools or using your visualization libraries if you're maybe building it into an application, and being a little bit sort of cross-skilled in that regard. Those sorts of focusing on development, but those sorts of developers tend to be a lot easier to work with in the teams and sort of have more opportunities because we can sort of task them into more problems, instead of having to go, all right, this team's going to do this bit, this team's going to need to do this bit, and it all becomes really difficult to deliver. So.
Great. Yeah, interesting. No one's actually said data. Everyone talks about the elephant in the room, the big.
I had to say it, but I recognize I'm not the only one.
Yeah. No, it's understandable, and I think it's interesting when you're saying about, I guess, using it sensibly, because it could also be used, and I think I can see us becoming even more lazy. with it for those day-to-day tasks and almost relying on it. And I guess you lose certain skills from it then as well, if you are using it. But data is really interesting. No, it's definitely a hot topic, and we're seeing a lot more investment into those areas of the business now, especially to use as I guess, a tool.
There's a tip there actually from what you just mentioned for the sort of maybe particularly the earlier sort of early stage careers with development, but it's a good tool for helping people solve development problems. You have your like your Copilot and your sort of different sort of IDEs that can just have it built in there, but you still need to develop the skills to understand how you're like why you're doing things and what you how you would solve it without them. And so for anyone that's maybe like in some sort of studies or they're just trying to find their way in and then they're in those junior roles and trying to grow, being able to use it is good, but relying on it as the only way to solve development problems is they're going to hold themselves back, because they won't develop that expertise. And so be really careful in uni, college, bootcamp, or whatever, in over relying on it to solve a coursework or something, because
Yeah.